The gavel comes crashing down, and the courtroom is quiet. Kody Brown, the figure once hailed as the proud father of a reality television dynasty, now faces charges, not on TV, but in a courtroom. Before a judge, secrets and betrayals, and family tragedy are soon to be revealed. And this time, there's no escaping the truth. The stinging crack of the judge's gavel boomed through the hall like thunder across the desert horizon. It was not a noise, it was a directive. The prattle, the murmurs, the anxious laughter, all of it ceased in a heartbeat. There was a heavy silence that permeated the courtroom, weighing down on all of them like the foreboding of a storm brewing to unleash itself. Standing at the center of it all was Kody Brown. For years, millions of people had come to know him as the self-assured, charismatic head of TLC's Sister Wives. On television, he was the guy with the easy grin, the flowing blonde locks, and the large personality, a guy who once made the world believe that a plural household was possible, that love could indeed be multiplied rather than divided. But today, no cameras softened the corners, no posed living rooms, no scripted confessions. Today, in the bright fluorescent lights of the courthouse, Kody appeared smaller. His wide shoulders appeared to be heavy, weighed down by the weight of years of secrets and torment. His signature smile was nowhere to be found, replaced by a harsh, almost defiant look. He wasn't a TV star here. He was just a man, accused, examined, and caught in the gears of the law. The gallery was filled to bursting. Reporters, nosy locals, and even die-hard fans of the series occupied the benches, hoping for a glimpse of the family saga that had overbled from the television into reality. There were some clutching notebooks, others phones tucked half under armpits, poised to capture the next incendiary moment. You could sense the tension of rumor suspended in the air, the expectation that something legendary was about to happen. And in a way, it already had. Seated on one side of the courtroom were the women who had once been his wives, Mary, Janelle, and Christine. Each sat stiffly, their bodies angled slightly away from him, as if even proximity carried a weight too heavy to bear. Their faces told stories without words. Mary's eyes were tired, lined with years of silent endurance. Janelle's posture was tense, her jaw clenched like a rock, every inch of her oozing silent defiance. Christine, on the other hand, wore her feelings openly, her face a mask of pain and strength, reminding one that she had already decided to leave the marriage months ago. And then there was Robin. She sat nearest to Kody, her presence a biting reminder of the allegations that had broken up the family in the beginning. Hugging a pile of papers against her chest, she seemed delicate, her lips pursed into a tight line, her hands shaking barely at all. To others, she was the loyal wife, the woman who stayed by Kody when the rest abandoned him. To others, she was the fire that burned down the family, the privileged wife who soaked up all the praise and wealth, leaving the others on the outside looking in. The four women together created a picture of heartbreak and betrayal, a portrait painted in gestures years before words would be said. The clerk's tone sliced through the silence like a knife. Case number 23-417 B. Brown Family vs. Brown Family. Presiding, Judge Eleanor Matthews. The words hung in the air, biting and decisive. Brown family against Brown family. It seemed almost ridiculous, like a title plucked straight out of a tabloid. But to those sitting in that courtroom, it was no laughing matter. It was the end of years of shattered promises, shattered allegiances, and wars that had started on the couches of suburban living rooms and ended up here, in the harsh, unyielding glare of the law. Judge Matthews pushed her glasses up her nose, gazing down from the bench with the sort of authority born of years of seeing families tear one another asunder for money, custody, and infidelity. She did not smile. She did not coddle. She did not care for reality television, or the sideshow it created. To her, this wasn't fun. This was a case, and it required order. Brown, she started, her tone firm and authoritative. You appear before this court in a case that involves controversies of financial equality, child custody, and allegations of marital misconduct. Do you comprehend the accusations? Kody's head came up, his jaw clenching. His deep, measured voice filled the room. I do, Your Honor. But I don't agree with the way this has been manipulated. This is not about crime. This is about family betrayal. A ripple of murmurs spread through the gallery. The gavel descended once more. Order? The wives looked at each other, but none of them said anything. For years they had shared the same walls, held together by religion, vows, and the conviction that they were part of something greater than themselves. But today, in a courtroom as legal opponents, they were no longer family. They were plaintiffs and defendants, foes separated by walls of paper, proof, and resentment. The burden of it all lingered in the air like smoke from a fire. To the audience who had been following the Browns for over a decade, this was the unacceptable endgame. They had seen the happy family introductions, the birthdays of the children, the love and struggle confessions that flashed across their television screens. They had watched the Browns battle against legal systems that would not abide their polygamous existence. They had watched them move, rebuild, and remarry. And yet, after all those fights against the outside world, the fatal blow hadn't been dealt by the law or by society. It had been dealt from within. The lawyer for the plaintiffs stood up, a tall woman in a black suit, her figure as pointed as the questions she was about to pose. She nodded at the judge, then met Kody's eyes directly. Your Honor, the plaintiffs will demonstrate not only that Mr. Brown abused the ideals of equality in his plural marriage, but that he mishandled shared financial resources, privileged one household over the others, and defaulted on his responsibilities as a father and partner. This case is not about lifestyle. It is about accountability. The words had impact like blows. Christine fidgeted in her chair, her fingers clutching the rim of the table. Janelle nodded slightly, never taking her eyes off Kody. Mary sat with her eyes fixed forward, her face impassive, but her silence was deafening. Kody leaned in, fists bunching. His attorney, a middle-aged man with a relaxed air, put a firm hand on Kody's arm, holding him back with a silent command to behave. But Kody's fury was evident, just beneath the surface. He'd always been the dominant one, the leader, the voice of command. And now, for the first time, he was on trial. His decisions, his allegiance, his whole life subject to the scrutiny of a court of law. And outside, beyond the walls of the courthouse, the world waited. News trucks clogged the street. Journalists yelled questions to anyone who would respond. Sister Wives fans argued online, their opinions overflowing from social media sites in real time. Some came to Kody's defense, saying he had done his best in a situation that was impossible. Others backed up the wives, saying years of preferential treatment and disregard had finally had consequences. Here in this room, all of that did not count. The verdict would not be determined by television viewership or public opinion. It would be determined by evidence, testimony, and the unyielding judgment of the law. The judge looked between the parties, her expression blank. Very well, she said. Finally, we will have opening statements. And so it began, the trial of Kody Brown, the trial of his family, his decisions, and his legacy. The gavel fell again. The hush that followed was oppressive. The heavy wooden doors swung open, and the mood changed. Heads turned, phones surreptitiously held high, and whispers passed like a ripple through the packed gallery. The Brown family was coming into court. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The chance to see, with their own eyes, the fractured faces of a family, once portrayed as one big happy household on national television. For years, Sister Wives had given fans a front row seat to the family's dinners, their holidays, their late-night talks around the kitchen table. But here in this harsh courtroom, there was no cutting, no music playing in the background, no voiceover to cushion the blows. Every look, every blink, every movement said it all. At the center of it all was Kody Brown himself. His steps were heavy, measured, as if each one bore the weight of not only legal charges, but years of family drama and shattered promises. His golden blonde hair, once the wild flapper fringe of his larger-than-life image, looked duller in the fluorescent glow of the courtroom. His jaw was clenched, his face hardened to a look of defiance fear. Behind him, his wives trailed in single file. Mary, the first wife, the one who had stood by him since the beginning, walked in first. She moved with quiet dignity, but her eyes gave away their fatigue. Years of being relegated to the sidelines, Years of holding on to a marriage that seemed to recede further with each passing season of their show had left her with hollow eyes. Nevertheless, she walked with determination, as though this courthouse was her last hope of taking back the voice that had been taken from her. Then Yanel, poised but firm, the image of serenity. Her down-to-earth personality was always her saving grace, but today it seemed like a shield. She clutched a pile of folders cradled against her chest, her expression impassive, her gait purposeful. If Mary seemed subdued and exhausted, Janelle seemed poised for combat. And then Christine, her chin held high, her face fierce but qualified with a sadness. She had already left Kody, openly and defiantly, stating that she would no longer reside in a marriage that made her feel small. To the world she was the wife who left. To Kody, she was the betrayal he could not forgive. But here, in this courtroom, Christine wasn't merely the ex-wife. She was a witness, a combatant, and maybe the sole voice who could shift the balance of justice. Last but not least, there was Robin, the final wife, and the most contentious member of the Brown family drama. She grasped a pile of legal documents in shaking hands, her eyes frantically sweeping the courtroom. To her fans, she was the devoted wife who had endured torrents of jealousy and resentment in order to remain faithful to Kody. To her detractors, she was the wedge that had split the family asunder, the favorite to whom every moment of Kody's time and resources were devoted, while the others fought for scraps. All four together had made a presence stronger than any TV show could ever manage. They weren't in family colors, lined up for a happy group shot. They were broken, alienated, each at individual tables, their silence more damning than anything that could be said. It was charged. The judge, high above the drama, watched them intently. She was accustomed to family fights, but even she seemed to know that this was not just any case. This was not about money, custody, or contracts alone. This was about the destruction of a family that had been shown, analyzed, and devoured by the millions of viewers. It was a trial in the court of law, but also in the court of public opinion. The clerk read the case title out loud again: Brown Family versus Brown Family. The words seemed almost unreal, as if the family name itself had been divided into opposing sides. On the one side of the aisle was Kody, accompanied by his attorney, and Robin, his one remaining legal wife. Across from him were Mary, Janelle, and Christine sitting shoulder to shoulder. They were not together in love anymore, but in grievance, in anger, in betrayal. As they sat down, the room was silent. Each wife had her own past, her own tale of how things had fallen apart. Each look in Kody's direction weighed years of moments, some sweet, some sour, all indelible. The judge's gavel came down once to restore quiet. "Counselors, are you prepared to proceed?" Judge Matthews asked, her voice authoritative. Kody's attorney nodded. The attorney for the plaintiff stood also, a woman whose eyes were sharp and piercing, with an air of command. She pulled on her jacket, eyed the wives to her left, and turned back to the bench. "Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiffs are ready." The judge nodded, jotting down a note on her file. She then addressed the Brown family directly. Her voice rang out across the room, serene but firm. "This case is one of claims of financial equality, allegations of misconduct in marriage, and disputes over custody of minor children. Everyone will have the opportunity to be heard. But let me remind you, this is not a stage. It is not a reality television show set. It is a court of law. Do you all understand?" The wives nodded wordlessly. Kody put his lips into a stern line, his silence saying it all. Reporters scrawled notes frenziedly from the gallery. Some whispered into their phones, commenting on what was unfolding in real time for the voracious online crowd. Live tweeting reactions from fans of Sister Wives, who had watched all seasons. Mary looks weary. Christine glows with power. Robin appears frightened. But in the courtroom, the theater was deadly real. The bailiff stepped to the center of the room, his voice booming as he announced the start of the proceedings. The lawyer for the plaintiffs stood again, her words biting, practiced, and devastating. "Your Honor, what stands before you is not merely a broken-down family. It is a family broken down by one man's behaviors. These women entered into a union with Mr. Brown, in the expectation of equality, love, and mutual responsibility. What they received was favoritism, money manipulation, and abandonment. Today, we will establish that Mr. Brown didn't just breach their trust, but he breached his responsibilities as a father and a husband. Gasps coursed through the room. Kody's eyes tightened, his knuckles turning white, as he grasped the side of the table. Robin laid a shaking hand on his arm, murmuring something too low for anyone else to catch. The wives across the aisle straightened up. This wasn't merely a legal battle to them. It was their opportunity to finally be heard, to give their accounts not in sound bites for TV consumption, but in the raw honesty of testimony under oath. The judge looked at Kody's attorney. Defense? The attorney rose slowly, his voice even, steady, rehearsed. Your Honor, the defense will demonstrate that Mr. Brown did not betray or abandon his family. We will demonstrate that he labored day and night to support them, to protect them, and to guide them. If relationships failed, it was not for reasons of money mismanagement or favorites. It was for personal decisions taken by the plaintiffs themselves. This is not about abuse. This is about resentment, jealousy, and revisionist history. The gallery hummed with murmurs once more. Two sides, two stories, two truths. And amidst it all, Kody Brown sat, a mask of contained anger on his face. He had been the assertive head of a large family once upon a time, the man who had vowed that plural marriage was possible. But here, in this courtroom, it had all come crashing down. The judge brought up her gavel once more. Very well, we will hear opening statements, and then testimony from the plaintiffs. This court will come to order. And with that, the Browns family soap opera, previously relegated to reality TV monitors, was formally on trial before a court of law. The silence that descended was heavy, unyielding. Everybody was aware that what was going to take place next would not just determine settlements for money and rights of custody. It would determine the Brown family legacy itself. The air in the courtroom became thick as the lawyer for the plaintiffs stood up. She had in her hand a fat folder of papers, the kind that not only spoke of testimony, but spoke of years of resentment, tension, and meticulously kept records of betrayal. All eyes were on her as she walked into the middle of the room. Your Honor, she started, her tone crisp and calculated. This is a case of broken promises. It is a case of a man standing before these women, promising equality, promising fairness, promising family, and then selecting favoritism, deception, and abandonment. We are going to demonstrate that Mr. Brown mismanaged the finances of the family, utilized shared resources to benefit one home, and abandoned the others to fend on their own. We will also demonstrate how his actions dismantled the very foundation of this family and damaged the children caught in the middle. Her sentences fell with the impact of thunder. The wives straightened, nodding almost imperceptibly, as if each syllable attested to what they had suffered for so long. Kody, on the other hand, sat stiffly, his face impassive, but his fists clenching tightly against the table. The lawyer directed a gesture at the plaintiff's table. We will start with Christine Brown's testimony. Christine stood slowly, ironing her blouse as she stood tall. She moved to the witness stand with deliberate strides, her chin up. For years, people had known her as the sensitive, warm-hearted wife, the one who laughed easily, but wept freely when the burdens of plural marriage became too much. Today she was laughing at no one, and weeping at nothing. She was determined. Once sworn in, she sat and stared at the judge, not Kody. Christine asked the attorney softly, could you explain to the court, in your own words, why you are here today? Christine's voice was calm, but laced with emotion. I'm here because I spent decades believing in a promise that was never kept. Kody told us we were equals. He told us every wife would be loved and cared for equally, that our children would all share the same father, the same provider, the same leader. But that's not what happened. I raised most of my children alone, while he built his life with Robin. Gasps resonated around the gallery. Journalists jotted away furiously, aware the quote would head every single article. The lawyer leaned in. Can you elaborate on what you mean by built his life with Robin? Christine nodded. When Robin came into the family, everything changed. Time, attention, resources. All of it shifted. It was suddenly not about us. It was about her. Our kids hardly saw their father anymore. He ceased attending our family functions. Funds meant for all families were given to one. I felt abandoned, and so did my kids. Kody finally woke up, his words shattering the silence. That's not true. The judge's gavel came crashing down. Mr. Brown, You will get your turn. Do not interrupt the witness. Christine's eyes flashed momentarily toward Kody, then to the judge. I am not here to discredit him, Your Honor. I am here because we survived years of being treated as if we didn't exist. I left the marriage because I wouldn't live invisible anymore. But this is not about me leaving. It's about accountability. We all gave everything we had to this family, and it wasn't fair. It was never fair. Her voice trembled on the final word, but she stood firm. The attorney pulled out a group of documents from her file and passed them to the bailiff. Exhibit A, Your Honor. Bank statements indicating joint accounts being drained, while individual funds associated with Robin's household were untouched. The papers were forwarded to the judge, then to the defense. Whispers filled the gallery once more. The attorney next called Janelle Brown. Janelle held her head high, her face as unyielding as stone. She brought her own folder of papers, and she placed it on the stand next to her. Mrs. Brown, began the attorney, you were termed by many as the practical wife, the wife who managed a good deal of the family's budgeting and planning. What did you learn? Janelle unopened the folder, removing a sequence of spreadsheets and charts. I kept our records. For years the system was working. We shared our funds, covered our children's expenses, and created a life together. But as time passed, the figures no longer balanced. Resources were being distributed unevenly. The rest of us were barely managing to cover food shopping, while one household never appeared to experience the same financial pinch. She pointed one of the charts into the courtroom. Here, look. Year after year, increasing amounts of money were poured into Robin's spending, her house, her business, her lifestyle. Meanwhile, Mary and I were struggling, and Christine had to take care of herself. The attorney asked, did you ever confront Mr. Brown with this? Janelle's jaw clenched. Yes, over and over. Each time I was reassured that it was temporary, that things would balance out, but they never did. The reality is, we were funding one family at the expense of 3 others. Mary fidgeted in her seat. She hadn't spoken yet, but her silence was oppressive. At last it came to her turn. Mary, the attorney said, you were the first wife. You've been with Mr. Brown from the beginning. What has this experience been like for you? Mary sighed. It's been isolating. I loved him more than anyone. I supported him when no one else would. But after a while, I was invisible. My marriage was a shadow. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased. She swallowed hard, her voice shaking now. I hung on, thinking it would improve, thinking he'd see me again. But all he did was put everything into this one relationship. I was a placeholder, not a partner. The gallery was quiet. Even the reporters stopped writing for a moment, stunned by the honesty of her admission. The attorney rested his hand on the table. Your Honor, these women made a commitment in the name of equality. That equality was denied to them. Their money was mismanaged. Their children were ignored. Their trust was violated. The judge nodded reluctantly, taking notes. Then the defense. Kody's attorney stood, buttoning his coat. His voice was even, but there was steel behind his words. Your Honor, what you have just heard is not evidence of financial impropriety. It is evidence of bruised egos. Mr. Brown was a husband to several women. That is never an easy job. If some felt loved more than others, that is not a crime. It is human. If some homes had more needs than others, it is because their circumstances required it, not because of favoritism. He pointed at Kody. This man toiled day and night for 18 children and 4 wives. He gave all he had, his time, his money, his energy. When marriages broke down, it is not because he left them, it is because they left him. At last, Kody himself stood up, unable to remain quiet any longer. His voice thundered throughout the courtroom, fierce with rage and hurt pride. I did my best to keep this family intact. I gave everything I had, my soul, my heart. If some of the marriages collapsed, it was not due to me. It was due to betrayal. I was holding everybody together, and they abandoned me. The courtroom burst into murmurs. The judge's gavel came down for the second time. Order, order in the court. The silence came back though, but the damage had been done. Lines were drawn. One side, the wives accusing betrayal, neglect, and favoritism. The other Kody accusing loyalty, sacrifice and betrayal in return. This wasn't a legal fight. This was war. The courtroom was a pressure cooker. With each word, each shouted phrase, each crash of the gavel, tension had increased and increased. Now the onlookers leaned forward in their benches, mouths open, anticipating what would come next. Even the journalists, high-profile case veterans, were unable to mask the excitement. The judge cleared her throat and sat with an expressionless face. We will now hear witness statements other than the spouses. And with it the case turned sharply and unexpectedly. The plaintiff's lawyer rose, her eyes shining with excitement. She fumbled through her notes before continuing. Your Honor, we call to the witness stand one of the Brown children. A murmur ran through the courtroom. This was not anticipated. The children had been kept hidden, shielded from the glare of attention as much as possible, even though they'd grown up in the public eye. But now, one of them was going to testify, not as part of a reality show confession, but on oath. The doors swung open, and in strode Aspen Brown, daughter of Christine and Kody. Now grown, she walked with measured stride, dark hair drawn back in a neat ponytail, her face nervous and resolute. The gallery fell silent. This was not testimony. This was history in the making. She was sworn in, her voice firm as she vowed to tell the truth. The lawyer approached gently. Aspen, can you share with the court what life was like growing up in the Brown household? Aspen glanced at her father, and then she looked away again. She inhaled deeply. When I was little, I used to think that my family's dream was real, that having 1,000 brothers and sisters, 1,000 moms, and one daddy who loved us all the same was the way it was supposed to be. But as I grew older, I understood that it wasn't equal, not even close. The attorney leaned in. What do you mean by that? Aspen's voice broke, but she persisted. We kids noticed. We saw Dad spending all of his time with Robin and her kids. We saw him canceling visits with us in order to make time for them. We felt like second-class children in our own home. Gasps echoed through the gallery. Kody rocked back and forth in his seat, his face flushing. His attorney touched his arm, reminding him to say nothing. Aspen's eyes welled, but her voice grew harder. I love my dad, but love doesn't erase what we went through. We were left out, we were forgotten, and it hurt. The lawyer for the plaintiffs allowed the quiet to linger, then nodded. Thank you, Aspen. No further questions. The defense lawyer stood, his face serene but piercing. Miss Brown, isn't it also true that your father supported all 18 of his children, that he labored mightily to feed you, to house you, to educate you? Aspen nodded begrudgingly. Yes, he supported, but support is not parenting. We required his presence, not merely his check. The defense attorney frowned, but continued. The harm was already done. The judge made a note, her face pinched tighter than previously. The word of a child, particularly one who'd grown up under the country's watchful eye, carried a gravity far greater than budget spreadsheets or acrimonious spousal disputes. But the clincher wasn't finished yet. The plaintiff's attorney wasn't done. She summoned another witness. This time a former neighbor and family friend appeared. A woman of middle age stood up, her voice steady as she swore the oath. I lived next to the Browns for years, she testified. I saw the struggles firsthand. I saw Mary and Janelle stretched thin, while Kody spent most nights at Robin's. It was obvious to everyone in the neighborhood. It wasn't about plural marriage. It was about one man picking one wife and leaving the others behind. The defense objected. Your Honor, this is hearsay. The judge shook her head. Overruled. The witness may continue. The neighbor leaned in. The real truth is, we all wondered how long it would last. It wasn't a plural marriage any longer. It was one marriage with multiple women living in the background. The room broke out in whispers. The judge pounded her gavel once more. Order. Kody's rage overflowed. He rose quickly to his feet, gesturing toward the witness. That is a lie. None of you experienced my life. None of you know what I gave for this family. The judge's voice resounded. Mr. Brown, sit down at once, or I will hold you in contempt. He sat unwillingly, but his breathing was labored, his face contorted with anger. The attorney for the plaintiffs pounced. Your Honor, the plaintiffs have demonstrated not financial favoritism, but a pattern of neglect affirmed by family members and independent observers alike. This is not jealousy. It is truth. The defense struggled to find ground again. Kody's attorney summoned Robin to the witness stand. She moved slowly, tissues clutched in her hand. After she sat down, she wiped her eyes before she began to speak. "I never wanted this," she whispered. "I never wanted to be the favorite. I love all my sister wives, and I love all the children. I didn't ask for special favors. I just wanted to be part of the family." Her voice broke as she faced the judge. "Kody spent time with me because I needed him. I entered this marriage with children from a previous relationship. They needed a father. Perhaps it appeared to be favoritism, but it wasn't. It was survival." The gallery was silent. Some were touched, others cynical. The defense attorney probed. "Robin, did Kody ever knowingly take from the other wives to give solely to you?" Robin shook her head, tears falling down her face. "No. He did what he could. If people felt ignored, it was not because he did not care. It was because he was only one man, trying to do the impossible." Her words hung in the air, tugging at the feelings of those who were watching. For the first time, pity did seem to tip slightly in Kody's direction. But then Christine's attorney stood once more, her eyes glacial. "Robin, if Kody was just one man attempting the impossible, why did the impossible always work out in your favor?" Robin stood frozen. Her lips quivered, but nothing emerged. The silence was more deafening than any response she might have made. The judge sat back in her chair, slowly exhaling. She had sat through countless cases, but this one was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. The courtroom wasn't merely hearing evidence. It was observing the breakdown of a family that had once stood for togetherness in the face of overwhelming adversity. The turning point had arrived. The child's testimony, the neighbor's words, the wife's tears. Combined, they created a picture much darker than any reality television show could have done. And as the session ended, one thing was certain. This was not merely about money. It was not merely about custody. It was about love betrayed, trust shattered, and public disassembly of a man who once vowed he could keep it all together. The judge banged her gavel. "Court will reconvene tomorrow." As the Browns filed out of court, the gallery hummed with whispers. The reporters swarmed outside, microphones at the ready. Fans on social media imploded with commentary, their feeds illuminating with outrage, sympathy, and shock. But for the family, the commotion outside didn't begin to register. Within their hearts, the silence was oppressive. The last day of the trial broke dark with expectation. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps before dawn, their cameras poised to record history. Sister Wives fans argued online, their views polarized. Was Kody Brown a victim of circumstance, or architect of his own demise? Within the courtroom walls, tension was palpable. Brown family members sat separately, each wife in a different row, no longer that united front America had witnessed on television. Kody alone occupied the defense table, shoulders rigid, jaw tight. He glanced at the door every few seconds, as if expecting someone, possibly even fate itself, to storm in and rescue him. But fate wasn't in the dock today. He was. The judge came in, robes flowing, face set in a firm expression. The gavel came down once, resounding like thunder. "This court is now in session for final judgment." They all waited in their breath. The judge started, her tone even but unyielding. "Throughout this trial, we have listened to testimony from wives, children, neighbors, and experts. We have studied financial records, family relationships, and personal statements. This case has been heartbreaking and informative. It is unlike any other to have ever appeared in this court." She shuffled her papers and went on. "Underlying the case is the question of whether Mr. Kody Brown exhibited favoritism and neglect as a husband and father in his plural household. The plaintiffs say he inappropriately favored one wife and her children over the others, inflicting emotional, financial, and relational damage. The defense says Mr. Brown acted in good faith, doing the best one man could with multiple responsibilities." The courtroom was hushed. Cameras softly snapped. Even the air itself paused. The judge leaned forward, her voice firm. "The court determines there to be substantial evidence Mr. Brown did in fact practice patterns of favoritism, both material and emotional. This favoritism played a direct role in the deterioration of relationships within the family. Although plural marriage is not at issue here, unequal treatment of spouses and children is evident." Gasps of surprise spread through the room. Kody's face went pale. The judge held up a hand. But, the court also understands the special difficulties of raising a family of this number in the public eye, with pressure from society and media coverage. While Mr. Brown acted very badly, his actions were not unconsidered. The decision must thus be balanced. She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. All right, the court finds in favor of the plaintiffs. Brown is instructed to give fair financial support to all children and spouses past and present. Custody will be on the basis of the welfare of the children, with no favoritism in visit or care. Additionally, the court strongly recommends family counseling and mediation for all. The gavel came down. This is the decision of the court. For one fleeting moment, everybody was still. It was as though time itself had been put on ice. Then the room burst open. Reporters streamed out to report breaking news. Onlookers hissed frantically and the Brown wives sat in shock, their faces a combination of relief, vindication, and sadness. Christine closed her eyes, one tear making its way down her cheek. For her it wasn't about victory. It was about being heard after all this time. Janelle sat in silence, looking thoughtful, already perhaps working on how to proceed. Mary gazed downward, torn as if she couldn't figure out if this result closed the book or raised only more questions. And Robin cried openly, grasping tissues, her sobs ringing through the chamber. She outstretched Kody's hand, but he jerked it back, his face icy, his pride hurt deeper than any court decree could slice. Kody stood suddenly, his chair scraping on the floor. His voice broke in anger and desperation. This is not justice. This is a circus. You have no idea what it's like to live my life, to bear the burden of so many souls resting on me. The judge snarled, her tone crisp. Mr. Brown, this court has made its decision. Sit down or get out right away. Kody stood stock still, his eyes burning, and then flung open the courtroom door, cameras shooting wildly as journalists pursued him down the corridor. His previously dominant stature now seemed smaller, diminished as if the verdict had taken not only his authority but also his sense of self from him. Back in the house, the wives sat still, silently absorbing the moment. For the first time in years, they were not talking through confessionals editors or reality TV show runners. They were talking through silence. And in that silence, each of them discovered something different: peace, sorrow, vindication, or doubt. Outside, the media firestorm erupted. Headlines flashed within minutes. Kody Brown loses in courtroom battle against wives. Sister wives' verdict shakes reality TV family favoritism. Confirmed, judge rules against Kody Brown. Fans debated across social media. Some argued in favor of Kody, claiming he was harshly criticized for attempting to do the impossible. Others were happy with the wives, commending them for standing up after years of silence. But above the din, above the hashtags and viral moments, the Browns themselves encountered the real consequences. Christine walked out of the courthouse holding Aspen's hand, a quiet smile on her face. She whispered to her daughter, "We did it. We told our truth." Janelle followed, her head high, her gaze steady. She didn't smile, but she looked stronger than she had in years. For her, this was about moving forward, one step at a time. Mary stayed back, saying a few words to the press, her words guarded but telling. This family has suffered so much. Maybe this is the start of healing, or maybe it's the end of something we can't mend. Robin kept out of camera range, her tears never ceasing. Her shoulders slumped as if the weight of the verdict bore down upon her more than anyone else. And Kody, he vanished into a waiting vehicle, his fate in limbo, his reputation forever tainted by the words delivered in that courtroom. And in the aftermath of the dust, one thing was certain: this case was never merely about one man and four women. It was about the frailty of family, the peril of neglect, and the fact that love without justice is a cage, not a home. The judge's verdict was a judicial one, but the tale itself had a lesson for millions of viewers worldwide. Families, plural, blended, monogamous or otherwise, do not make it on titles and impressions. They get by on faith, equality and common love. When one retains affection, when bias fester, the ground gives way. And once they begin to spread, no number of cameras, contracts or admissions can keep it intact. The Browns had lived as a symbol, first of unity, then of conflict, and now of collapse. But in that collapse was a warning and a hope. A warning of what happens when love turns to possession. A hope that even after destruction, healing might still be possible. The narrator's voice would end the video in this way. The gavel has fallen, but the Brown story isn't really done. Because families, dysfunctional ones included, live on in the hearts of their children, their decisions and their teachings. And for Kody Brown, maybe the best judgment isn't what was rendered by the court, it's what the world has already witnessed. The camera would go black, leaving the audience with the chilling reverberation of a gavel pounding wood, once a signifier of order, now the sound of a family's truth bared for the world to see.